Ligatures, they come in a huge variety of shapes, sizes, colors, and materials, and they all have a different effect on sound and response. Now today we're going to talk about 3 ligatures I think you should avoid and 3 good alternatives I think you should buy. Now before we name names, my attorney has insisted I read this legal disclaimer. The thoughts and opinions expressed are intended for entertainment purposes only and do not reflect damages up to and including loss of limb as pursuant to maritime law. Hi, I'm Dr. Wally Wallace, and welcome to the Saxophone Academy. If you're interested in product reviews and saxophone masterclasses, please do subscribe. We've got some cool topics on the horizon. Now today we're talking about ligatures. Now the ligature doesn't merely just hold the reed to the mouthpiece, it holds it in a way that needs to create an airtight seal between the reed and the mouthpiece. Now if the ligature is not doing a good job of holding it securely enough in the right places, you're going to get little gaps between the reed and the mouthpiece that create chirps, squeaks, and terrible response problems. And here's the reality. After you soak your reeds, they will start to dry out. When you take a little break, rest for a few bars, or wait for the trombone section to figure out where the rest of the band is, your reed will dry and start to pull away from the mouthpiece because it's organic material. And like all organic material, when it dries, it's going to dry and the shape of the fibers will change, creating little gaps between your ligature and your mouthpiece, and that creates big problems. So if you've ever had the experience of your reeds sounding great right after you soak them, but then start to have big response problems 5, 10, 15 minutes into playing, it might be a problem with your ligature not creating an airtight seal between the mouthpiece and the reed. Now here's a quick way to see if your ligature is doing its job. It's called the pop test. Quite simple. Place your mouthpiece flat against the palm of your hand and draw air out of the mouthpiece. If you have an airtight seal, you'll hear a little popping noise, meaning you've created a vacuum inside, and your ligature is still working. Now try that after 20 or 30 minutes of playing and see if your ligature is still creating an airtight seal. Now the ligature does affect tone, but not very much. In the hierarchy of sound, it's your reed, your mouthpiece, your neck, your saxophone, room acoustics, barometric pressure, your socks, and then your ligature. It affects it a little bit, but not much. Now what it does affect is the feel, and that's important because if it feels differently, you start to play differently, and that creates a feedback loop. It feels good, so you play a little better. It feels bad, you're going to adjust the way you're playing. It does affect the way you play, but not very much. And remember, there's nothing wrong with the stock ligature. Remember, some of your favorite records of all time have been made on stock ligatures. Charlie Parker, Zoot Sims, Stan Getz, they played on stock ligatures, and they sounded fantastic. So if you're not sure if you need to upgrade your ligature or not, I've created a handy flow chart to see if yours needs upgrading. Now let's talk about 3 ligatures I think you should avoid and 3 good alternatives. Now to prove I'm not hating on one brand or company, for each ligature that I recommend you don't buy, I'm going to recommend a great ligature by the exact same company. So without further ado, let's dive in and talk about 3 ligatures you should avoid and 3 good alternatives. And number 1 is the Francois Louis Ultimate Ligature for about $60. Now, I was surprised to learn that Francois Louis is actually Belgian because I assumed this was welded together by leather-clad Australian marauders. It looks like something that was made in the Thunderdome in post-apocalyptic Australia. It's very rough around the edges, and there's a couple of big problems. Now, first, the good. It sounds good, and when it is sealing a reed, I think it has a very nice core sound, and a lot of really great players play on it. Some of your favorite saxophonists inevitably play on this ligature. But let me explain why I don't think it's a good buy. Number 1, as I mentioned, it's made very crudely, and there are sharp edges everywhere. This is sharp, that feels sharp, this is very sharp, that feels sharp. Okay, no big deal, you're a tough guy. But here's the problem. Your mouthpiece, if it's hard rubber or a plated metal, is going to scratch and gouge very easily. Now here's the worst part. This plate that actually sits on the reed is a very sharp, unfinished edge. So as you tighten it, it digs into the reed, which I do not like. And here's the bigger problem. If you're not careful, I've known several players that have scratched the table of the mouthpiece on this very sharp plate. I just don't think that's a good design. I think it's something you should avoid. It's a decent price, it sounds good, just too many flaws. The other big problem is, as you put on your reed and you want to tighten it to the mouthpiece, the screw thing turns the plate. So as you turn the screw, the plate wiggles around, which means getting it lined up perfectly with your reed is really a big chore and not very good. The other problem is you cannot leave this on your mouthpiece without a reed on because you will scratch and gouge your mouthpiece. Some people put an old reed or a little piece of wood between the reed and the mouthpiece. I think that's ridiculous, especially when there's a lot better options. Now, made by the same Francois Louis company, I really do like the basic ligature. Now, I actually don't have one on me because I loaned it to a student and I never got it back, but it is very sturdy, very well made, easy to tighten, easy to fasten, and it's got nice rounded corners, and I find it sounds just as good as the Ultimate. Now, the Ultimate is $60. The Basic is only $40. If I needed another ligature, I'd buy another one of these in a heartbeat. I think it's really a well-made ligature. Sounds great, and I think it looks pretty cool, too. So, Francois Louis Ultimate, avoid. The Basic, I think it's a great buy. And number 2 is the Vandoren leather ligature. The best way to describe this is those nightmares you have. You know, when you're running down a hallway and the hallway just keeps getting longer and longer and never ending? That's the way this is with tightening. Now remember, for a ligature to work, it has to hold the reed against the mouthpiece securely, which means it can't give or flex. This stretches to no end. So you put it on there, your reed seals, it starts to pull away, you tighten it, and you tighten it, and you tighten it, and you tighten it, and this thing will keep stretching for days. Also, this is an early model. The hardware is a teeny tiny little screw that's actually not that easy to get a good grip on it. They've since updated the hardware, but the early versions, kind of a big disappointment. Another big problem is it comes with 3 pressure plates, a soft leather, a metal plate, and a harder leather plate. Now they're held on by Velcro, but it's the strongest Velcro I've ever seen. You could build a spaceship out of it. It's good when it's on there securely, but it's problematic getting it straightened. And if you don't get it straight the first time, it's really difficult to adjust. I just don't think it's designed terribly well. When it's on and sealing a reed, it's a very pleasant, dark sound because this does attenuate a lot of the higher partials, which is why some people like it. I just don't think it's worth it. Getting a good seal on your mouthpiece is more important. I don't feel this guy does a good job. And it's just not that great to look at either, especially when you consider Vandoren makes the MO. Now, the MO is a fantastic ligature that's $20 cheaper. The leather is $60 or around $60. The MO is only $40, starting with the gold lacquer plating. And it goes in different platings. They got rose gold and full gold and all sorts of platings. It sounds great. It's very centered, free-blowing. But most importantly, the hardware is super easy to adjust. It's easy to slide it on and off the mouthpiece, easy to change reeds out with a single screw. And what I really like is the pressure bars go laterally across the grain of the reed. And I find that gives it a very good seal. I've had this one for several years. I know lots of friends that own them. Had very good experience with them not breaking and holding up under pressure. I think it's a great sounding ligature, very well made, and frankly, I think it's a good looking ligature. Nothing fancy, but just aesthetically pleasing. I think it's a much better option than the Vandoren leather. The Vandoren MO for about $40. I don't think you can go wrong. At number 3 is the BG Tradition, a $117 mouthpiece currently. Now, I've owned several of these over the years, and you may wonder, why have I owned several? Well, they sound good, but I've had to buy several because they break fairly easily. First, the good part, the rails go parallel with the grain of the reed, which I find is very free-blowing and sounds good, does not create a very good seal though. So when your reed starts to pull away from the mouthpiece, inevitably you want to tighten the screw. And here's the problem, and this is why I've broken several. Right here, where the screw is fastened onto the other side of the ligature, it's not very sturdy, and I've broken several over the years. I'm not alone. I've had other friends tighten the ligature and have it break right there. Not a great design, not made terribly sturdy. It sounds good, but at $117, I just think you should pass on this. Now, BG also makes the Duo, which is a very similar design. Rails that go parallel with the grain of the reed, somewhat free-blowing, but you can see it's almost as if they've taken feedback into consideration. It's a much sturdier design that I don't think is going to break on you. I certainly haven't had this one break. Now, this is called the Duo because it's made for saxophone or clarinet, which is kind of my only problem with it, is the fact that the rails, if you can see, are more narrow on the Duo than the Tradition, which I can only imagine is so it fits both saxophone and clarinet. I prefer the sound of this. So I wish they would make one separately for clarinet and saxophone with this updated hardware, but a little bit wider rails further apart for the saxophone to match the great sound of the tradition. But this is made well. Aesthetically, I think it's fine. I don't love the pop of red color. It just doesn't go with my saxophone. But if you like the red, you're going to be a happy camper. I think this is very well made and a good design update over the tradition. And again, it's $95. It's the most expensive of the basic ligatures I'm covering now. All said and done, I cannot think of a good reason to buy this over the Vandoren MO. At a 40 bucks, I just think that's a little champ that you can't go wrong with. But this is certainly a good option if you want something a little bit fancier and you don't mind your reed occasionally not sealing. So in the comments below, let me know the ligatures you love, the ones you hate, and the ligatures you love to hate. Next week, we're going to be talking about some fun extended techniques on saxophone, growling and fluttering and scooping. Oh my, it's going to be a good time, so stay tuned. But until then, go practice.